Hi everyone, welcome again to my channel. So it's been a while, and with the version 2.4 for Tower Fantasy Global coming in a few days, first let's discuss about the newest flame character, and her name is Lan. Oops, wrong weapon. Yeah, and her name is Lan. So for the overview, first let's cover about her kit and the mechanics, how to understand how it works. Then we'll cover her advancements and maybe provide an insights on how much or which specific advancement should you pull for depending on the resource. Next, we'll cover her trait and her matrices. And finally, for the team comps, about how to take advantage of her and the best of her synergies. Next, as for the summary or the should you pull, first let's cover about the pros and cons of having Lan and the kit and maybe help you decide if Lan is for you. So, without further delay, here we go. So, Lan's kit revolves around the use of these parasols. So those parasols do a lot of things besides off-field damage. Notice even after I switch to Rebelia, the parasol still inflicts damage over time. So as long as the enemy is near those parasols, they'll continue to inflict damage. And notice I have this feather count or parasol feather count. So this is important for most of the calculations of the damage in landscape. The thing about this plume feather count is that it's consumable. Like I said, for most of the damage around landscape, so you consume this feather count, and it's also useful to keep. Let me clarify that although the umbrellas or the parasols have a maximum number of 3, notice that for most of the descriptions in landscape, there is this term called polyfeather parasol. So the polyfeather parasol is actually 1 plus the number of your parasols on the field. So at maximum, if we have 3 parasols deployed on the field, you have 4 polyfeather parasols. Parasols are automatically generated upon hitting a target, and they last for 20 seconds. Now, first I'm gonna cover the first part of Lan's skill called Devastating Glide. So the best way to use this skill is first you have to make sure that you have the maximum number of parasols on the field. Because what happens is that when you use this skill, Lan jumps to all of those parasols to inflict massive damage. And notice our frenzy state. These parasols have corrosion, so if target is near the parasol, they will receive more flame damage and more damage from charge attacks. So later on, I will cover that specific synergy with charge attacks. These parasols deal burn damage to the targets near them every second. I've mentioned earlier about Flame Vortex, and the thing about that one is that it's the damage that's coming out from these parasols, and you can maximize this. One is by using your skill. You excite the parasols, or you can excite them manually using Molten Heart. So Molten Heart is triggered by holding the attack button while in mid-air, and notice the feather count is decreasing, but the parasols are spinning rapidly, so that will be a higher DPS. Lastly, while in the Fortitude Resonance, so a lot of things happen if you have Lan on the comp. So first is whenever you use any weapon or discharge skill with Lan in the comp, there is a 2.5 seconds taunt to nearby enemies, so it's really good for holding aggro, especially if you're the under Fortitude Resonance. Also, if you use Devastating Glide while under the Fortitude Resonance, the previous Vermillion domain now expands to a specific area, so you grant hyper body and damage reduction to all the teammates inside that area, which is really big. So if you notice, yeah, and it follows you, so even if you move around during the team comp battle, so as long as your teammates are within that domain, so you share the hyper body and the damage reduction. So pretty neat, right? So also, aside from that one, Lance Discharge is unique because aside from the damage that it does, it provides a buff depending on the polyfeather count. So earlier I mentioned that the polyfeather count is 1 plus the number of parasols. So you can use the discharge as a buffer. So you discharge the land and you have a damage buff. So before I move on to her advancements, I want to share a really neat feature about Lan while exploring. So if you hold the attack button outside of combat, notice this umbrella. So it's like a marker, and you can place it at a certain distance from you in any direction, and once the parasol is there, you can use it as a teleport point. Really neat because it helps really also in exploration and those very hard or hard to reach areas. Now let's discuss about Lan's advancements. So for A1, she gets 2 new skills, namely Vermillion Strength, so hopefully the translation will stay the same after their release, and Glowing Fire. First, Vermillion Strength. So this is a very important advancement in Lan's kit because with Vermillion Strength, if you have Lan's weapon or the Vermillion Bird in the lineup, the ammo cost of the other weapons is multiplied by the polyfeather parasol. So I keep mentioning, so the polyfeather parasol count is 1 plus the number of parasols on the field. So maximum of 4 since you can only have 3 parasols on the field. So 1 plus 3 is 4. And what happens is that the ammo cost is consumed multiplied by the number of the polyfeather parasols. So for example, if you have Annabella with 8 bullets, so 1 dodge attack from Annabella would now cost 4 bullets instead of 1. And the best thing about that one is, although the ammo cost is multiplied or is spent faster, also the damage, the charge, and the shatter effects are also multiplied accordingly. So you get 4 times the number of bullet or ammo damage or shot in one go. So another good thing about A1 advancement is called Glowing Fire. Now, Glowing Fire is a pretty subtle effect wherein whenever the burn tally is triggered or the enemies are taking damage from Fiery Crash or the damage from the parasols, 30% of that damage is transferred to the 3 units near the target, which can also happen to the main target itself with the highest HP percentage. Now, this might seem unusual or not that important, but what makes this effect good is that it prioritizes damaging the highest HP opponent with the highest HP percentage. So in effect, most of them staying on the low HP percentage. Now, I know most of us are still using Crow Matrices. So if you use that and you have Lan, then that means that you can trigger the effects of the Crow Matrix, 2-piece Crow Matrix more easily because, or equally among all those targets, because they will be an equal amount of HP. Now, next is her A3. So whenever you use a discharge attack or shatter, so the Fiery Crash deal 30% of their usual damage one time and they sort of explode, and they reduce the attack of the enemies near the parasols by 15%, so that's great for survivability. And the best thing about this one is that Remember, there's a cooldown when spawning parasols, but if you have a tree, the moment you enter combat, the first hit or the attack you do on the opponent will immediately spawn the maximum number of parasols. So it's really speeds up your ramp up time in setting up for your DPS damage. Next is her A5. So her A5 basically improves the fiery crash damage. The damage now ignores 30% of or a certain percentage of the target's flame resistance. So the damage now from the parasols, from the fiery crash, and the transfer HP ignores that resistance as well. So maybe later on, if we have more enemies have high fire resistance, then we can surely take advantage of this effect at her A5. And also the flame damage dealt by corrosion. So by the way, corrosion is the damage buff that enemies receive whenever they are near the parasol, and also for the charge attacks. For her A6, an improvement over Lan's basic attacks on the ground, her attack combo on the ground, and her attack sequence while in mid-air. So the damage is also increased, and keep hearing me mentioning about the polyfeather parasol count. Now with A6, remember that the maximum then is just 4. Now with her A6, so the polyfeather parasol count for the Phoenix Sweep and the Fiery Crash is now a maximum of 5, specifically for those for the calculations of those effects. So this is also useful because it also buffs the other parts of Lan's kit. With those advancements, I would say that obviously the most important advancement in her kit is her A1, because this opens up crazy synergy between Lan and the other flame DPS weapons, specifically Annabella. So this will change the meta, and the good news about her A1 is that Lan doesn't overshadow Annabella. In CN, she broke Annabella's kit. Imagine you're doing 4 times the dodge attack amount of damage in one go. And also the glowing fire, which is really useful for those who are using Crow Matrix. So it's easy to whittle down all of their HP below 60% for it to trigger much earlier. Now, if you can spare, aside from her A1, probably move to her A3. So A3 increases her ramp up time because you immediately spawn the 3 parasols. And with that, you can just go spamming Anna's kit or move on to your main DPS, and the off-field damage from those parasols are already at maximum. So that's one of the best utilities of her A3. Her A5 is, like I mentioned, there aren't many content with high flame resistance, and the increase in the modifiers are not that high to warrant going for A5. The same as with her A6. So overall, the best advancement for Lan's kit is her A1, followed by her A3. Of course, if you are a pure flame comp and you want to output the maximum number of DPS, you'll probably go for her A5 and A6, but in my opinion, it's really not that necessary, and the Lan's kit is pretty much complete at A1. A3 is just nice to have, as it speeds up the ramp up time and better DPS. Now let's move on to first Lan's trait. Lan's trait is a bit on the defensive side, with her being a fortitude weapon. So what happens is that, notice that Vermillion domain earlier. So all teammates within that area, if you have Lan and their fortitude resonance, they have reduced frost and flame damage by 24, and also increases the final damage of the entire team by 8% right now based on the leaks. She also buffs the survivability and damage of the main DPS in your lineup, so it's really good if you're using the fortitude resonance in the team. Next, let's move on to her matrix. Lan's matrix is a bit of in a weird spot. So by the way, these are CN values, but basically for her 2-piece set, as long as you have one flame weapon equipped, either DPS comp or fortitude comp, It's easy to satisfy. So you have increased flame attack and flame damage by a certain percentage. So this two-piece set is really good because it's active in the offhand slot and boosts both the attack, the flame attack, and the flame damage. So it's sort of a 2-in-1. Although, based on the leaks, the modifiers are really not impressive, but definitely if you're a flame main and you plan on using Lan, the two-piece goes a long way because it's a good offhand matrix, and definitely you can use it for the future as long as you keep on using one flame weapon. Now, for the 4-piece set, so this is unique and general at the same time. So what happens is that you gain elemental damage, specifically depending on the number of that weapon you equip. The good thing about this one, like I said, is general because aside from flame, it applies to frost, physical, and vault damage. As a bonus, final damage increase is better if you're using an alteration weapon or an altered weapon. So the 4-piece is very easy to satisfy. You just have to have the specific element weapons equipped. You don't have to do anything, so it's always active, no duration, so that makes it really unique. And the best part of it is that it's active in the offhand slot. So Lan's matrix is pretty much applicable also in the future, especially with the new alteration weapon that's coming in, like Fiona. You can really make use of Lan's matrix on this one, and the best part is that it works in the background or in the offhand. So your main DPS can still make use of those Samir or Crow or Shiro matrices. Based on the leaks, even the modifiers for the 4-piece is not that impressive because you can only have a maximum of 3 weapons by mechanics. So it's pretty much comparable on how much maximum damage boost you get from this. But I guess the beauty of Lan's matrix is that it's flexible and easy to maintain. That's really an important factor at the cost of having lower modifiers. It has good applicability in the future, even outside pure flame comps. Now let's move on to the team comps. Let me start first by the meta flame comp, then be Lan is best paired, like I mentioned on Lan's A1, is Annabella, because together they dish out a tremendous amount of damage in a short amount of time and still have time to do other stuff like Lance skill or Lance discharge. Or if you have Lyn is also good, especially if you have her at A6. Her Moonlight Realm and the attack buff from it is really good to have with Lan. So the meta flame comp when Lan arrived was Annabella, Lan, and Ruby because of Ruby's ultimate heat. However, in CN, ultimate heat for Ruby is really high, 25%. However, in the global, this is balanced to 10%. So the ramp up time for ultimate heat may not be that easy to do, especially if you don't have Ruby at A6. So you will be using Lyn, Lan, and Annabella. So that's for the DPS flame build. However, since Lan is a fortitude weapon and she also has a lot of synergy outside of DPS comp, so she can act as a good tank or fortitude. So as fortitude, you can pair it with Yuma to activate that fortitude resonance. You will be using the on-field with Lan and then just use Yuma for her skills and discharge. You can also use Lan with Saki. And if, for example, you have Lyn as well, so Lyn, Lan, Saki, you also activate Saki's A1. So that way you have skill reset and the off-field damage from the Parasols and the Lyn field from Lyn's Moonlight Realm. So there are also team comps you can use. For example, there's nothing stopping from pairing Lan with King, for example. King will act now as the off-field weapon. Basically, just use King's discharge alternatively with Lan, because Lan's discharge also buffs. You use King's discharge and then skill, then move on to Lan to main DPS. Although you can use Lan with Ruby So or Cobalt rather, but the main synergy with Lan's A1 or the ammo is mainly works with Annabella. So Annabella has a longer DPS life now with Lan on the team. Basically, Lan is really good not just as a DPS support weapon but also a great fortitude weapon. You can use Lan even in not pure flame combinations. You can also pair her with Meryl if you didn't pull for Saki. So this gives Lan longevity in terms of the fortitude role. So you can really use her for team comps on hard content wherein a tank is really necessary. Plus, she has really high shatter rate, especially when she casts her devastating glide with all those maximum amount of parasols. In summary, first let's pros and cons of Lan. So for the pros, Lan is great off-field DPS or DPS off-field support for the flame team, and the good thing is that she doesn't overshadow the previous DPS, which is Annabella. Rather, she greatly enhances her kit, so she will raise the damage of the flame comp. And she has two functions aside from the normal DPS weapon. She can also serve as the fortitude weapon for harder content where you need a tank. Then Lan is for you. The con that I can think with her kit is that they locked her most important synergy behind her A1. It's good that's only at A1. So overall, Lan is a great unit. She can do a lot of things, off-field DPS or DPS support. Plus, she has great utility in exploration. Finally, should you pull for Lan? First, are you a flame main comp or do you have Annabella? At least get her A3 because that would really increase your ramp up time, and that would mean faster DPS. But if you're short on budget, A1 would be good enough. So, it's not meaning in flame but would like to function as the tank or the fortitude resonance in the harder content like Origin of War and Void Abyss. So you only need her at A0 if you want her to be a tank or an off-field DPS. So I hope I was clear in this video, and if you have any questions, please leave a comment below, and don't forget to hit the like and subscribe button, so it will really help the channel grow. So now I will be enjoying my latest weapon in CN, which is Vermillion. Maybe when she comes around to global, I will do a review of her as well. With the 2.4, there's a lot of contents incoming, so best of luck on our pulls and exploring the new content with inners. Happy gaming everyone! Thank you.